course, no guest, and I guess it's going to be no glitches. We'll see how that works.
I see you live on Facebook right now.
Okay, well, great. There you go. Happy Friday. We are live. September 4th, Friday.
It's another Blur Day Friday. September 4th. September what? I want to say I've been on vacation, but I haven't been on vacation at all. It's like this weird amorphic times warp we're in. Like where does the day, I mean, honestly, it's Friday.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure to see you. Always a pleasure to touch base and connect with our friends and family out here in Facebook world and clients, etc. But it's just mind blowing to me how fast the time is actually going in this kind of odd set of circumstances we're all living in.
I know, it's so bizarre. But, you know, the great thing is in our professional world, the business just seems to be booming, and we were able to get another accepted offer this morning. And so that was a great accomplishment after a few weeks of going on tours with them. So that's always happy news to start the day off with.
Well, you know, not only that, Jay, it talks a lot about, and I was thinking about what it takes to be successful. And so much of this in our industry is persistence. And it's constantly, it's continued action items. And you'd see these tours, so the public who doesn't know, in these COVID times, we've had to adapt some new protocols. And actually, they're a little more cumbersome, but I kind of like them better, at least for the germaphobe in me and for, you know, the sense of organizational purposes, because we have to have clients, sign forms in advance, seller, broker, everybody that's involved in this has to acknowledge, hey, there's this weird thing out there with Corona, be aware. And then we start to schedule things. So when you have to schedule a tour, it's no small undertaking. When you show somebody 7 or 8 houses, it's 5 hours worth of, effort in front of it is 25 hours. Effort during it is 4 to 5 hours, right? As you go through, you have to make all the appointments, and they usually block you in 15-minute increments. And if you're like that, you know, and then of course we live in LA, which so far traffic is reasonably good. But it's a Herculean task. And I saw a lot of the negotiation going back and forth. Because Jay and I are, you know, transparent to each other. We can see the business, and there was just a lot of great will that you've created with the other agent, and a lot of good communication with your client, and you brought about a very, I think, a mutually winning transaction where everybody's benefiting. It's actually wonderful to see, because you don't always see that, as you know.
Yeah. Well, you know me too. On top of the tours being and the appointments being confirmed 2 or 3 times before we actually go out there, but everything had to be from A to B to C to D. It had to flow in a sequence, or it would drive me crazy. So like I had to first like block it all out, figure out who we're gonna start with.
Yeah, like a map,
it has to go,
like a giant map, right?
Yeah, it has to have a flow, and it's got to go in sequential order. And you know, like I'm so efficient about these.
I always like to joke, as you know, if you could figure out how to do a zip line from here to your office so that you didn't have to deal with any traffic or inefficiency, the straight line, that's what Jay Wu likes. And everything you try to do is kind of geared to that efficiency. But you know, that efficiency is not wasteful. It's respectful. It's a courtesy to others and yourself. And then of course, you're doing your client a service. You know, we could talk about that for a minute. When we tour people through the properties, part of our responsibility in that is helping them understand the geographic boundary. What's happening in this area? What are resources? What's traffic like? What are schools like? What happens if you go to a supermarket? Who's in your supermarket? What, you know, those type of things that you can find. And then you also want to understand, how's the ingress? How's the egress? How do I get in and out of my property? And who's surrounding me? So it is thought provoking, and you want to do it in a flow so that you're not zigzagging, because zigzagging is highly inefficient, and actually you end up doing double work, which anybody who knows you don't, what is it? Measure twice, cut once. That's the Jay Wu axiom. I learned that one from you. If you know, it is.
Always triple check showing appointments, because not all agents keep a good calendar, and not all agents keep their appointments, and not all agents show up on time. So what I have learned is that if you just, even if you verify, they still don't show up sometimes. So their loss, their misservice to their client, if their clients only knew how some of these shenanigans that happen behind the scenes of agents that just are not responsive, don't follow up, nor show up to give the actual tour of a confirmed appointment. They don't show up for a confirmed appointment. Those are the most baffling to me. Whether it's our listing and the buyer's agent don't show up, but that's on them and the waste of our time. But when we're the buyer and we're showing their listing and they don't show up, I'm like, are you kidding me? Oh, I was so crazy. I forgot. I'll be there in 15, 20 minutes. Like, no, we move on to our next tour. Are you kidding me right now? So it's like mind-boggling, the daily nuances of headaches that has to be dealt with on the most basics of a human etiquette and protocol sometimes that these agents do not have.
Being professional.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, being professional. I think of it this way. Well, we have been in situations in the past where our client, representing a buyer, has forgotten something, or in some cases when we were green in the business a million years ago, they might not show up because we hadn't developed that rapport with them, right? So that's always embarrassing because you kind of go hat in hand. But I remember specifically going to each house I set the appointment and saying, hey, I'm sorry my client's not here. If I couldn't reach you on the phone, I just wanted to show up and say thank you. I'll preview the home, because that's a courtesy. It's a professionalism. And you and I both know when it comes to our own listings, I mean, we're actually on the other side of things, right? I mean, we've all gotten caught in time where it's not good when you're late, and it doesn't reflect well, and it doesn't show that and your fiduciary responsibility to the seller. But over time and experience, you realize how valuable that is, to respect other people's time and energy. And as you know, it takes so much to orchestrate an appointment. It's the seller's schedule, it's the seller's agent schedule, it's your schedule, it's your client's schedule, and then it's traffic. So you've got 5 moving targets, plus you have time, like just when are we going to go get this in the direction? So it's not easy. It actually takes a real pro to do it right. But what I see, and consistently, especially with you, Jay, is the results are always there. Like your conversion rate with buyers is outstanding because you deliver them a whole experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I love that part. Well, and like we've been doing it, for so long and for so many people. I definitely know by now, as do you, in terms of how to set it up so it's the best experience we can, because moving, whether it's to buy or to sell, is a very stressful experience. And if it was easy, everybody would do it every single day, but it's not easy. There's a lot that goes on to make it happen. And it is a labor of love for sure, but it's that caretaking, mentality, I think, that makes the impact for the people we help that much more, I hope, reassuring, comfortable. If they only knew all the paddling underneath the lake that happens, like the duck on water, we say all the time, because we make it look so smooth on top, but boy, the chasing and the scratching and the clawing and the persistence to slot everything in and make it look effortless is a ton of paddling, to the point where when the day actually comes and all the tours are done and everything's been shown and so forth, it's kind of like, whew, that was great, but boy, did it take a lot to get there. And it's like launching a rocket up into the orbit. The tour is smooth, but boy, all of the front loading effort it takes to make sure that launch goes successfully is a lot. So.
Well, we can talk about that for a second too, because that is not only experience, but that's also the idea of courtesy, to your point. And it's a way of just establishing protocols and behaviors. And what we found, as you know, is that many people hire people that don't really have all the professional protocols. I mean, there are definitely pros in our business, and we know many of them. We do a lot of business with them. But there's, sometimes you see and you run into people and you're like, okay, You got your real estate license because you were doing something else and you thought it was going to be get rich quick, and or you didn't understand that this business is so much more 24/7. You and I both know it's like you're a doctor on call, and I'm not trying to equate the importance of that. I'm just simply saying when your clients have the bandwidth and the time and they need you in their moments of anxiety or fear or concern, which they have multiple layers of that experience, then you need to be available to them, and you have to be a good listener, clarify with them what's going on inside of what are they experiencing, what are you worried about, and let's walk it through using our book of experience, saying, okay, that's page 32. Yes, this is normal. Let me explain to you what to and what are the outcomes, what are the possible variations of what could happen. And you and I practice that, and it's constant, and we see it in our agents. In particular, I see it a lot in Kate, and I see it in Michelle, where they both really do a very, very good job. In Miranda, where they're really going out there and trying to, or even Naveed, like where they're really trying to sit there and say, okay, I need to understand what's going on. Let me walk you through what these concerns are. And I think that's not only being a professional, but that's actually being a friend. And that's maybe a little bit of what we need to grow in this world, extending ourselves, beyond whether you want to merit as friendship to professionalism or professionalism to friendship, but you take it that seriously.
Well, it's not just a job or a career, it's our life. And so, because the texts and emails, I mean, I know first thing, 6 in the morning, and they'll go until 11 o'clock at night. Now, after 9 p.m., I really, that's when I shut down in terms of checking or so forth. And I wear my Apple Watch, so a lot of times I can't even get away from it because I'll be sitting there and all of a sudden something comes through. But sometimes technology isn't perfect. It doesn't always come through, to the Apple Watch, even if my phone's in a different room, et cetera. But it starts first thing from the moment we wake up until the moment it goes to the moment we try to shut down. And you're right, it is being on call constantly and being kind of tethered to our technological devices to be, prompt and on top of any urgencies that do arise. But it is that labor of love and the caretaking that overrides any of the other things, because it is just like this whole, gosh, I could do that, I can help, I could answer that, I can help with that, constantly wanting to be that friend in the business of being there for them and helping them and guiding them and wanting to respond, to the questions. You don't know if it's urgent for them or not, but I mean, I know we treat a lot of things, you're better about stretching out time and things on many, many things. I'm a little bit more like on top of it, but you're both, I think, are really great about being able to always show up right when we're supposed to. That's the beauty of the universe, right? Everything really happens. I've learned this from you, which is everything happens and rolls out in its time and its evolution and the way it's supposed to. And no matter how much will I might try to shove into something, everything unfolds, comes together, and it's ebb and flow in the right way. So those are some of the things I've learned from you, Sean. So over the last 15 years. So
well, thank you. Well, that's, to me, I always think of time as a wave, right? And they always talk about time waves. And so you think about time as a wave, and you're just kind of surfing it. And sometimes it's going to change its shape and its size and its variation and its cadence and its speed, but being in sync with it. And I think that's something that, so much in our modern society, we're really cerebral, we're super stimulated. And that's wonderful. Like, because what I know about you is you're power packing. Like, you are just on a steady diet of just build the energy, build the energy, build the energy, build the energy. And then when you need to draw on the energy, you've got it, and it's go time, and you can keep going. Like, it's ridiculous like that. I fatigue more quickly than you do, or run out of the bandwidth sometimes. So that's why I surf it a little differently. But I guess complementary, we do see both sides, and we kind of work the spectrum together. So, yes, reciprocally, I feed on that energy. You are always a constant stimuli of accountability and work effort and being present and doing what you need to do to fulfill the relationship, to fulfill the promise of being a professional to each other and to our clients. So I'm always in tune with that. And, I have found that often when we are intuitive, when we follow what's right inside of here, we're almost always led on the right path, right? And it's usually when you get too up in here and you start thinking, bing, 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 it's like a ping pong match, dot, 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 dot. I mean, dear gosh, just to, if you're watching, reading, eating, you're doing anything in this environment today, to your point, it's an overstimulation and it's hard for the brain to process. So unlike you, as you know, I take those morning hours to go through a whole meditative process and an exercise regimen so I can reset and recalibrate. And then I'm like, okay, the anxieties are out of the way. I've addressed those little demons and thoughts or whatever, and I power pack myself like that. But my kid's gonna be a little bit more like this, where Jason, you're like a shark, and I'm kind of like porpoising along. Oh no, mostly straight line, mostly straight line. I'd call you a barracuda. But that has a more negative connotation. Today,
well, yeah.
Today we had. Go ahead, you go, girl.
Oh no, I think it's just again we're like Wonder Twins. We just say the same things at the same time because I know we spent this week collecting and taking a little break from the guests that we had so far, and wonderful guests we've had on the show. We have many more wonderful guests lined up for the rest of September and October. So I'm excited for that. But we really wanted to get back to our grassroots, and answer and collected a week's worth of questions from the audience of things that people want to ask, but either scared to ask, timid to ask, want to know the answers, but haven't really gotten around to asking. So we've collected some wonderful questions from the community, right?
Oh, yes. And the answer is sometimes I find people who, yes, there's an embarrassment, or they're know-it-alls, but they don't necessarily know it all. So it's nice to be able to solicit that, and people can share their questions and kind of and put it out there with not necessarily being, outed for their knowledge or lack of knowledge, and it's a safe environment to do it. But they do have questions, and it seems in our profession, Dave, because so many people are licensed per se, and then a lot of our friends and family are stakeholders, they're owners of real estate. They have some experience, but you and I transact. I mean, at this point, between finance and real estate, it's thousands of transactions. I mean, literally thousands. We negotiated money for many, many years and real estate, and the focus of being real estate for as long as it's been, over a decade now, or about to be a decade, if I'm right. You keep the time better than I do. That just puts us in a place where we really can, I would dare say, truly are, call yourself a master is a little egotistical, but I'll definitely call us experts, true experts, and I'm comfortable with that. Well, I see some questions. Do you mind if I ask you one, and let's see how you go? We'll spitball with that.
Sure.
We'll go back and forth.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So Andrea wrote, "Hey, I keep seeing news stories that the market is really hot right now, and that I could sell my home. So my question is, where would I go next?"
Go next in terms of with this pandemic, obviously it has shifted people significantly, and people just seem so surprised by the market, right? And what's been happening. Now, sadly, vacancies and rentals are a real thing. I mean, there are more rentals than demand, and that is apparent in every single area we've seen, is that there could be 80, 90, 100 units for rent. And I even looked at the stats for the last 30 days just to see how much has transacted out of those 80 some units for rent. 13
Wow.
got rented in an entire area. I looked at just a little sector of the city out of 86 listings, just for 2 bedrooms. I'm not looking at 3 bedrooms. I'm not looking at houses. I'm not looking at 1 bedroom, just 2 bedroom, 2 baths. The typical rental market, 13 got rented in a month's time, whereas that would be triple that number. So there's all of this rental vacancies, and not only are landlords scared of tenants and how they're gonna be, acting and doing what they say they're gonna do, but also tenants are scared to move and shift out. And there's not been this huge influx and outflux demand. But subsequently, houses, on the other hand, houses are going like wild cakes because people don't want to have shared spaces. People want to have their own outdoor spaces. And of course, in Southern California, what's better than having a little piece, even if it's a large balcony, a little backyard, or big yard if you have a larger family, but or dogs. I mean, obviously the dog adoption rates have been unbelievable, or pet adoptions in general. I mean,
Through
those
the
are
roof.
all kind of like the reasons why there's just this huge shifting in how real estate has been reacting to the pandemic over from pretty much from April till now. And the affordability, unfortunately, in Southern California is definitely reached this new height because the multiple offers that are occurring on single family homes are through the roof. Or something special like what Kate listed last month that she just closed at the beginning of August, which was a top floor, beautifully done, condo. And she also got 14 offers on that and got that 75,000 above her list price in a very, 7 days she sold that. So there are those nuances and special things that happen to cause a property to go well above its list price and for people to vie for it. But generally, the rule of thumb is if you like it, there'll be 20 other people who will too. So that's just what I've noticed.
Well, I was going to add a little bit to that, and it's really kind of like when people come to that conclusion, okay, maybe I want to take the money and run. To your point, we have an incredibly tense market for sellers, lack of inventory, and super cheap financing, like crazy, stupid financing. The people who are purchasing our luxury condominium, which closes today, by the way, record breaking. The amount that they're financing on 30-year rate, now mind you, it's private money, is sub 2.5%. I mean,
Wow.
that's like what? Like what? Now they obviously keep a lot of money with the institution. That's a
Sure.
relationship. But the point being, like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, you should borrow all the money you can and just
Absolutely.
do anything else with it. Recycle bottles to make money. I mean, it's ridiculous. But
Yeah.
but helping people understand, that's super interesting. Like, okay, where would I go? And that's one of the things that you and I do. So we'll role play it for a second. I say, Jay, what's most important to you about selling your home right now? And
To be able to, transition out of a busy area, and I see a lot of change happening and development and traffic, et cetera. And I just don't see a future here, and possibly to consider where else can be a better fit for my family's changing needs.
so and what I was right now, things are changing in a way. There's more congestion, there's more traffic, more development. It's a little chaotic, and I don't really see a great clear path into a future. And I can appreciate that. So what I've just learned about you is what's most important selling to you is you want to make a change out of this kind of chaotic situation that you're in the middle of and have some hope for future. So
Right.
when we think about what's hopeful about your future, what do you imagine is the most important part of that for you? What's most important to you about what that hope represents?
It represents peace, having a little space to breathe, to be able to have my kids ride their bike down, a street and not have to worry. I know homelessness is a big issue. It's pretty much city life versus country life. It's a different experience to be a city mouse versus a country mouse, right? And I see a lot of friends that moved out to Oregon, Washington State, to Westlake Village, actually, and out in Thousand Oaks area and Ventura County and less populated counties. Those have been some of the options that I've seen a lot of neighbors and friends exercise recently. And so just got me thinking, like, what is that exploration process and what does that entail? And it's a big change. And so there's fear around change.
It's a huge thing. It's a huge change. Well, and relative to that, what I've heard you say is you actually have a visualization. You actually have an image in your mind of things that you like, that you're attracted to. some of that country living, some of that more suburban feel, some of that less traffic and that less sense of having to deal with a lot of the inner city issues that we deal with here on the west side of LA, whether that be traffic or homelessness or crime or just general dirt, et cetera. Here you are out, and I can visualize from what you've said that feeling like Westlake Village. That's a great one to ring a bell with, because that's such a beautiful community, and a lot of people should know that it has grown over the years based on people expressing exactly what you're expressing, that desire for something a little bit different and still having the quality of Southern California life, right? And then you have other people who want to do this more radically. And I would say radically is moving out of state. That's a big move. You and I both know moving is in the top 10 of stress items, like period. I think it's in the top 5. It's like a big deal. And here you are going to another state, and who knows who you know or what have you. So, well, Jay, I mean, I appreciate you sharing that, because I wanted to share a little bit without going a whole lot deeper, because it's you and me and we know a lot about each other. But this is the kind of exercise that we use for our clients. This is the kind of conversation we'll go. And I could go another 5 layers into that. I could peel it all the way down to the meeting of your life. That's our responsibility, because we have found that when you have clarity, you make the right and correct decisions. It's easy to do. You don't have regret. You don't have fear. You don't have anxiety. You become clear. It's hard to be clear in this environment when you're under stress, when you're fearful, anxious, and you're worried about the money, and you're worried about these issues, and all of a sudden it's an oppressive mindset. And we all know, if you're like this, it's pretty hard to flow. You're like just a ball. It's like a knot. But when you get a massage and you get all loosened up, and you're in it, right? So I appreciate you indulging me there, because I love you and I know the vision, and we share. I mean, that you just described my vision by just your own description. And it's not, listen, we know how fortunate and grateful we are to live where we live and do what we do, and the people we are part of, and we are totally committed to that process, right? We're all in with civic duty and what we can do to contribute. I mean, my God, you were on a 3.5-hour meeting last night about zoning changes in the area.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that for a minute? I'm kind of super curious. We can digress and come back to the letters or the questions, but I'm, top of mind. I think that was a super fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all of the city of Los Angeles is finally updating its zoning codes, and they haven't done that since the 60s. So it's over 50 plus years since they've updated zoning, and so they've hired, city of LA, development and community development folks to do surveys and assess area needs and get public comment. The thing about public comment, though, is people really don't pay attention to any of the postcards and emails and public notices or things in the mail until it affects them in an adverse way. And so that came to a head finally in the community my house is situated in last night. And that was from 6 p.m. until about almost 9:30, and 170 plus folks in the community who joined the webinar for the Zoom.
Wow.
And we had 80 plus folks in public comment. Everybody gets a minute apiece. So imagine between unmuting, people stating their name, address, having their 1 minute, and most people use their 1 minute plus. To speak up about their voice, and everybody has a voice, and all voices are welcome. But and again, it should be directed towards the board members of the WNC. This is actually it is a gathering process. This is like your voice needs to be heard. Everybody's going to have different opinions. Obviously, there's a majority feel of what people want, of course. Affecting their streets and their local blocks, et cetera, in the community. But really, it comes down to writing to our public officials. We've got to let, field deputies, to let the councilmen, to let the mayor, to let planning, to let all of the folks that are the actual decision makers on all of this hear because they don't live here. They don't walk these streets. They don't know these streets inside and out like you would as a third generation Angelino, or like I've lived here for 27 years. every single day, and having my kids in the local public school and walking up and down the streets, driving up and down the streets, being in every inch of this area, they don't know that like we do. I mean, when it's a 1900 block versus a 2300 block, or, the intersections of each of the streets and what each intersection, entails, each nuance is very different. So there are a lot of folks who've never been to any public comment type scenario. Some obviously were first time they've ever said anything in 40 some years of living in their homes, et cetera. And these obviously long, drawn out meetings happen all the time. We've been through many, and you could tell the folks this is the first time or news to them, et cetera. And it was pretty long, but maybe not as intense as a physical meeting like we did that we had for the Westwood bike lane one that we had over in the West LA building. And that one had about 300 folks that came out for, as well as opposing for that bike lane scenario about 4 years ago. And I think that it just got such pitchfork and broomstick type energy, because again, I think people being in a same room together and having that combined fervorish energy is a different sensation than being muted in a group of a couple hundred people and being asked to speak in a digital, like on the phone. So I think it's a different energy. It wasn't definitely as intensified as it could have been, but there was definitely some adamant words that were used about people trying to express themselves.
Well, first of all, to your point, when you do participate in these forums, as we have over the many years, we do know that when you're in person and you're meeting, which we can't do safely at the moment, but when we are, there's almost like a mob mentality, and people kind of stack on each other, right? So the anger, like your point, if you remember the potential rezoning of Westwood Charter School's boundaries, and that we actually got the school board, the president of the school board, to come to our meeting and talk about it and how they weren't going to do this because of the population and the overflow and what their plans were, and TK going to North Sterry or whatever other plans they had at the time. So we've been involved where it's been that kind of vitriol before, where there's just a lot of anger or frustration. But it's super interesting because the city that we live in has its own agenda too, right? I mean, yes, we the people, and we all have stakeholder input, but at some level they have to make some changes, and they're going to be making some changes. And that's why it's important to be civilly engaged, because that way you're civically engaged, so that you can go ahead and voice your opinion. Like, look, please don't give me 5 stories on Pico Boulevard. Give me 3.5 or 4 stories, and break it up and put a little greenway and put a little tree and put a bench and widen my sidewalk and slow my traffic a little bit.
Sidewalk.
Whatever you can do to make it. I would love to widen the sidewalks. I mean, we look at the person we had, our Paul Tyler, and if you go down by John O'Groats right now, I don't know how many tables he stacked out there, but I'm going to say it's probably 20, and good for him. And I'd love it if the sidewalk were a little bit better, but it almost feels like a little slice of Europe. But ironically, it's on Pico Boulevard with a heck of a lot of traffic. But anyway, it's nice to see. Well, I appreciate that too. And I guess the audience should know what the city's talking about is rezoning parts of this part of the city, because we're in those transit oriented centers where there's bus lines and train lines. So theoretically, they can build much more density, because the occupants of that density, which should theoretically lower the cost of living a little bit, or at least the cost of housing, could be using public transit. So they could use the train, or they could use buses because it's on Pico Boulevard or on Westwood Boulevard or adjacent. But it has impact on people. Like, all of a sudden you lose your sunlight, you lose your privacy. I was thinking of our friends on Midvale and our friends on Glendon. Like, if they do that, then all of a sudden they're dealing with way more traffic, way more bodies, and it's uncomfortable. It's not that more neighborhoody feel. So, and it's interesting too, Jay, to your point, until it's on your front doorstep, like, you and I are out there. How many times have we had meetings where it's just us and the government people talking, the councilman, the supervisor, the police, and we're just talking amongst ourselves about issues on our agenda, and there's really no public outcry until it gets really bad, and then So I would love to see more people civically engage. I recommend it highly. It's a little tedious at times. It can be a little arduous, but your voice gets heard. So, good for you. I'm glad you stuck with it. I was in the beginning of that meeting. I jumped out because I had a presentation for the Cheviot Hills Homeowners Association relative to the homelessness issues and the program we've started, which we'll talk about later. But and then I checked in with you later. You checked with me. I was like, oh my God, I was on that call for like an hour and a half, and you're still going at the WNC? Wow.
How did the Cheviot meeting go? How did your presentation go?
It was super interesting. We made a number of different presentations. So essentially what we've done is we're creating a private entity that is designed to supplement and reinforce the government's agency efforts in addressing homelessness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have Los Angeles Homeless Authority, LAHSA, we have PATH, and you have St. Joseph, and you have all these outreach, SPY, you have all these great organizations that are designed to help people experiencing homelessness. But what they're really lacking is outreach teams, right? So we found that in the greater Los Angeles area, which now the count is 66,000 people experiencing homelessness. So if you've ever been to the Coliseum, or if you've been to Staples Center or the Forum, it's triple their capacity and about 3/4 of the Coliseum capacity. People living on the street. And it ranges, right? You've got kids to old geriatric folks and everything in between. And it's obviously a humanitarian crisis. And there's a combination of empathy and sympathy and how can I help? And there's the other part of, okay, but wait a minute, please don't go to the bathroom on my front sidewalk.
Right.
I'm not comfortable with that. And so it's this, how do we marry that? So what we found was, in its own way, the government owns 30 outreach task force to handle all 66,000. There is no way you can efficiently do that. You can't develop rapport. If you're experiencing homelessness, odds are good you have some issue, whether it's a stomach issue, whether it's a mental health issue, whether it's a physiological issue or a psychological issue, right? Like you are so just kind of downtrodden by your circumstances. You're so ashamed, or you're so discarded because people look past you all the time and walk over you, or walk past you, ignore you because you're unpleasant to look at, or even to smell, or maybe you whatever it might be. So what we decided to do, in modeling this after the Pacific Palisades, was to form a nonprofit. So we formed our own nonprofit organization called westlahomeless.org. Worth the website for you people. So if you want to take a look at it, it's a project I'm involved with now. And it's a subset with WNC. We started from the WNC, but then we realized private enterprise can do things that are less encumbered than what governance can. And so when we organized this 501, we were able to take solicitations. So we've gotten it from your HOAJ was awesome. They stepped up and gave us 12,500. That's wisdom. We actually got our neighbors to the north, the Westwood Homeowners Association, to contribute another 10,000 or 15,000. Paul Koretz, our councilman, he contributed 10,000. ROWNC board contributed 10,000. And I know I'm leaving someone out, and I'm sorry for that. So we're starting to develop that momentum. Then when we have that kind of fundage ready, we can go to the core sponsors. We can go to Starbucks and Google and Fox and Disney and Century City and say, hey guys, these are our businesses here. We're trying to create a safe environment for everybody experiencing homelessness, from the homeless person to the stakeholder who lives there as a resident, paying rent or mortgages or homeownership. And maybe we can create gated outreach for our geographic boundaries. We are hiring from the People's Concern, which is an organization out of Santa Monica, extremely established, where they will actually out to every site that we identify and develop that rapport so that you can build the trust, and then you can start to bring people in. They have to trust you. Their experience of life is so hard, it's so oppressive to be on the street. You're discarded, you're kind of thrown away. So you have so much shame and you have an aversion to anything. You can't believe anybody wants to help you other than out of pity, right? Because there's pity giving, there's plenty of that. I know I get it. I'm going to Starbucks, I'm going to buy a $5 cup of coffee. Okay, dude, here's $3 for my change or whatever. But that's not really the philanthropic purpose, right? We're trying to build people up so they can change their circumstances. So this outreach is more dedicated to hey, how can we develop rapport and help you move out? The other thing it does is it starts to quantify what our population looks like. We really understand how much of it's migratory, how much of it's residents. We know that we have about 200 full-time people living on the streets in our general our boundaries of the WNC and a little bit further north. And then we know we have a migratory population that moves in the thousands. I mean, you and I both have been here on Pico Boulevard. I know I see 50 to 100 a day. I don't even recognize, people just kind of
Right.
drifting through. So, and not a knock on the city or the county. It's just so unwieldy. It's so, and they have so many protocols and things that they have to follow, whereas private enterprise can do it more efficiently. So you asked in the very beginning of this, how did Cheviot Hills? They asked great thought-provoking questions. Like we presented several times, and most everyone's like, we want a solution. We like your general plan. Here's the deck. Let's go with it. Whereas Cheviot Hills is like, well, wait a minute. Could we not do that ourselves? Could we not contract directly from the people's concern and not contribute to your organization and just have it dedicated for us? And well, like, theoretically you could, but that's really expensive for a very small part of the city. But it was that kind of stuff. It was kind of like, okay, how do we mix and match, make sure that the menu is offering as broad a scope as it can? I am in contact with Century City Business Chamber. Louis Shalachi, is that how you say his last name?
Sure.
He made the introduction to Vicky Nussbaum. She's awesome. She gets it because she also does Studio City and Century City. So she's dealing with these issues, which I didn't realize they had issues in Century City. Like, I've never seen homeless people in Century City. I've seen them walk by, but yeah, they've actually got issues. So it tells you it's everywhere, and you can tell I'm impassioned about it. And I feel like we're on the threshold. And I think what happens is when you get real community buy-in from government and from stakeholders, then you allow the people with real resources to participate. They kind of look around and go, how many people are buying into this? Yeah, I can do that because I there's no free ride. I'm with the people, right? And that's what we're trying to do, is collect that collective consciousness. So I'm very optimistic we're going to achieve what we want. We need an annual budget that's about $250,000. It's a lot of money to run annually, but for a Starbucks, for a Google, I dare say they sat on that crane I'm looking at every single day while they're building the Google complex.
Yeah. No, well,
Thank you
I mean,
for letting me speak about that a little bit.
yeah, I mean, but real issues need some radical solutions to create change. And it's true, sometimes the timeline of governance is not in line with the timeline of our needs. So let's circle back to, and thank you, I know that's a big passionate issue for you, but we definitely will have more on fundraising.
Yeah, I just went off on it.
and the
I'm
budget
sorry, I
on
didn't mean to
that.
do that. I know this is about. Yeah, no, for sure. I appreciate that. We'll go back to the questions. You have what you want to ask?
Yeah. One of the other questions we got was, we have a small house in a good location. We want to move, so we're not on top of each other, but we can't find anything we can afford in the neighborhood that we want to live in. Should we just remodel? Is that a good investment? So I thought that was a really good question.
Oh, I love that question. I mean, that really is the one where you start to peel away the layers and make sure people understand, hey, great idea, conceptually fantastic, understanding the different problems, but do you know the challenges with remodeling? Because I need to be that open, as you well know, Jay. You've experienced it. You built an extremely gorgeous home that was painstaking in a lot of detail. It's a gorgeous house. You took an old house that was, hey, you got in it, you bought it into the market, you got your slice of the pie, good on you. And then I don't even know how much improvement you've made, but I almost tripled your investment relative to how nice your home is. But having said that, it was daunting. You went through a lot of stress. So when we look at that situation, there's really kind of two ways to skin it. There's one is, with any client, as you and I both know, we have to have their finances up straight. Like, hey guys, are you ready? If we find this for you, you got to shoot and go. So do you need to sell that house to do this? Because that's part of the puzzle of finding one in your neighborhood. Because you're not getting at this market, in this marketplace, you're not going to get a sales contingency. You're not going to get any contingency that allows you to sell your home. You're going to need cash in the bank ready to rock and roll, right? So that's important. If you can afford to do it, fantastic. Then we can do a couple of different things. We can direct solicit. I mean, I'm sure many of our stakeholders have all gotten those letters. Hey, I have a buyer who's in your neighborhood. But part of it is also our networking. We're so established in the community, and especially with our brokers, we know them all very well. Many of them have become friends. And we can say, hey, by the way, I've got this, or hey, I got a buyer looks like that. So we can unearth possibilities potentially in the areas that you're interested in. But let's say you're not. Let's say that you're not finding luck and you're getting a little exasperated and you are on top of each other. Okay, the remodeling program. First of all, it also has a budget. And whatever you budget for, let's say you get a bid for $500,000, I think it would be reasonable and intelligent to add another 20% on top of that. Not that I want to spend your money, but you got to understand everything you change. You might want a different materials you're contracting out for or finishes. You need a contingency, right? And changes that happen. So,
well, speaking of materials, though, between all the wildfires and everybody else also adding, whether it's accessory dwelling units to their properties or also doing their own expansions, right now, September, the lumber shortage is real. I mean, it is such an issue with the cost, as well as, again, everything comes down to supply and demand. And when you're trying to do what everybody else is trying to do right now, which is to build back a home that they lost in a fire, whether it is the lack of trees that got burned because of acres and acres of wood has been burned down, or thirdly, because everybody else is also building right now as well. I mean, all three, talk about a perfect storm. There's a lumber shortage, there's a material shortage. And then also with the tariffs and the import export right now, there's a lot of other materials. There's a shortage that you
steel and metal
build. Yeah. And not just steel and metal, but other materials, whether it's fixtures, lighting, et cetera, things that were imported from other parts of the world to make it cheaper. That's not accessible right now either. So there's a whole series of confluence that happens when you can't get access to the things that you want. And sometimes even in the calmer times, it would take 8 weeks or so to get a cabinet fixture or a light fixture or something that you wanted when you're remodeling. But now it's like, who knows? Who knows when you're going to get it? So that could cause a huge delay, timeline, and cost.
Well, and that's the other part too, right? So when we add cost to the equation, and to your point, now actually everything's more expensive because there's so much greater demand and more people competing for it, and they can drive that more, and it's harder to source. But you also have this time equation, right?
Yeah.
And that's also the part that you can run into. So you may plan, hey, we'll be done by this time next year, but maybe you're not. And maybe when you go to remodel, you're not living in the remodel. You're living somewhere else. You're going to go rent somewhere else. And that's an additional cost. So you really have to unpeel those layers and unveil those layers so people understand, like, these are the complex, these are the problems. Now, in terms of investing in a good neighborhood, rule number one in all of real estate is location, location. Always the house. You can't change location. So I'm a big fan, and I can't tell you, I mean, much to my own cutting my nose to spite our face, but I've counseled people, like, I think it's better investment for you to consider, remodeling. That may be your best option because fiscally, financially, it's the best thing for you. And you can get what you want where you live. You already have the neighborhood. Why give that up? I mean, unless you're going to be able to see that transfer. So, and that doesn't always happen. Sometimes when you line up everything, and you and I have experienced this many, many times, if I could ever share one bit of advice, luck is preparation meeting opportunity.
One of my favorite phrases.
You're prepared and line up your finances, right? And then the opportunity will eventually unveil. It just presents itself, and you don't expect it. How much did we get a phone of? Absolutely, that we had no idea that person was calling. I mean, I got a call on a holiday weekend on a Monday morning at 8 a.m. Hey, I saw your sign. It's 8 a.m. on a Monday morning. I think it was President's Day weekend or one of those weekends. And okay, but I answered the phone because I'm neurotic and I do. And we ended up selling that house to our own client, to our own agent, really. So that's a success story. It's about being present in the moment and being in touch with it. So I do caution people, like, look, it's complex. You really need to plan it right. If you plan it right, there are many ways to navigate it. If you can find the home, if you could spot the home from the exterior that you really like, we could always direct solicit people for the buy side. But if not, I think always consider remodeling as a viable option, but make sure it's within your budget and your timeline, because those are both critical issues.
It's
I had
true.
another
And I
question
have
for
to
you,
say,
though,
though,
actually, that I thought was interesting that came through.
sorry, I
Please.
think there's a little bit of a delay in the technology. It's been rough the last couple of weeks because I don't know if it's just the Wi-Fi has been absolutely horrid in the community. I don't know if you're having a delay when I'm speaking, but when you're speaking, it seems to be, it muddles half the time and I can't hear. I don't know if the reception is going along well on the live feed or not, but I know for me on
I'm
my
hearing that right now.
computer. Okay. Got it. So it has been a little bit of a tough back and forth, but at the end of the day, it comes down to talking through your scenario with a professional that you know, like, and trust. Go through the basis of numbers, definitely to go through calculations. What was your basis? You know, how much, when did you buy your home? What's the basis of value of your land and your property value? The other big kicker that most people are not aware of, if you add square footage and whatever you improve, the old tax person was going to come and reassess value. So guess what happens to property taxes?
They're going to get their slice.
Oh, yeah. But one thing I learned by talking with the tax assessor and having her come, and the field deputy for the county tax assessor when she came and spoke, was that you can also contest their assessment and saying, hey, this is my basis on the original part of my home. I've only done improvement to this section of my home. I only want you to increase my taxes on this added square footage and not on this other part. And they'll actually go through an analysis. Now, I haven't done that for myself. Shoemakers' kids don't have any shoes, and contest some of the increases that they've done to my personal property taxes. However, that is another heads up about cost changes that will happen, that I know some people, if they've inherited the family home or so forth, or they have a 1,500 or 1,600 square foot blueprint home, but they want to add another 1,500 square feet to their property, just know that depending on what your improvements are, you're definitely going to get taxed on the addition, but you know, what you preserve or what you do or don't touch on your original 1,500 can also, you can contest the reassessment of property taxes that can happen as well. Just from another, like, oh, I didn't know. And one of the things that people don't think about are property tax reassessments as well. So that's something else to consider. For folks that are 55 and over, you have Prop 60. If you're dealing with Prop 60 is 60/90, out of county versus in county, et cetera, to preserve your property taxes on the basis of what you bought it for versus when you move, whether you stay in LA County or if you're moving to a different county, the prop number is different. But 55 or older, you can keep your property tax basis if you're considering moving to a different county or within LA County. So again, another cost consideration to think about when going through it. But that's the thing. I know that most people are so fearful of just having a conversation, and it's not so intense, really. It's actually taking that first step. I think for people is always the hardest step. That first step of just knowing who to call and then having a conversation. And it's a real enlightening conversation that I know 100% of people who've sat down and talked with us never regretted having that conversation. And it's not anything more than having a professional kind of dissect through, hey, let's lay out all your cards. What are you dealing with? What do you got going on? And how can we take the professional experience that we have with what your experience is and what your outcome you'd like to see, and kind of just matrix it all kind of together. And it's always just fun to sit and talk through people's stories. I'm always fascinated by people's stories and their scenarios and what they're trying to accomplish, and to kind of walk them through, hey, if you do this and then that, if you do this, it's that. And it's always a this or that kind of a path. Each path kind of shifts according to what other components that are added to it every single time. And it could be, sometimes it's 10 years later, what we talked about with someone became a listing or a transition or something, but it's not an immediate thing always. It's always about, hey, over the course of what you're trying to do, so long as you have a balance board that solid and sound, that is there for your best interest at the end of the day, that's all we want, right? Is for people to just talk things through versus, oh, why didn't you talk to us like before you made that decision? Because we could have talked you through the unintended consequences of some of the choices that you make, and we can help you through that without any attachment to the outcome. Because sometimes, like a lot of it, we just go out giving free advice. We only get paid if we work on a contingent basis, right? We only get paid if the outcome involves us, right? But in the meantime, we're like the Pied Piper or whatever they call it, where you just give it away, give it away, give it away. We just collect data and give it away. Collect data and give it away. Because at the end of the day, we want the people that are in our sphere to be protected. We don't want any harm to come to them. We want them to get some good, solid advice that not everybody has the life skills or the experience or the expertise in it to advise them properly from multiple perspectives. And that's what I love about obviously having you as my bounce board every single day, is that your perspective and what you see sometimes is in line, and what you see, what I see, but then you say, what about this? And same thing, vice versa. You see it from your way, you see it from your way, but then I might just notice something. You're like, oh, it's like right there, but then, I might point it out. So that's the bounce board of, I have a trusted, guide in you, you have it in me, we have that bounce board, but then we can then combine that and then share that with the people who reach out for help. And I think that's something people don't always have access to, right? Is a trusted bounce board to run things by.
It's interesting because the client, the condominium, the townhome we've listed in Santa Monica on Harvard, gentleman was a professor of psychology at Berkeley, tenured and retired. And he actually called me yesterday. We were talking about this situation over at his place. And he complimented me and gave me the biggest attaboy, because the compensation financially is wonderful. It's a blessing. I'm grateful for it. But the attaboy has its own merit that's probably potentially equal, if not greater. It's how you feel about yourself, your esteem. And he said to me, he said, Sean, I want you to know, and you're a great listener. You're willing to walk me through this. And he probably has 10 to 20 questions every single day. And we've been doing this for years at this point. Every time I talk to him, as we've accelerated, it's more frequent. But it is a constant checklist, because that's how he organizes his thoughts. And I just sit there and go through all the anxieties or the fears, the questions, and do the best you can with it. If I don't know something, like you, if we don't know something, we will get you the information. We'll point you to that resource to do it. Other than that, rapport is earned because you're trustworthy and that you're willing to put in that effort to somebody. Then you and I both do that at a really high level. And I would also encourage anyone, if you just want to shoot the breeze and have this kind of conversation, everybody who knows me knows I'll talk about pretty much anything like this. You could talk about dust bunnies and I'll have this type of conversation with you, right? But if you want to go,
I don't know about dust
if you want to
bunnies,
get
but
into the real estate equation, I could probably talk about them for a little while, though. Yeah, I certainly notice them whenever they're in my hallway. I'm like, oh, dust bunnies, they make me crazy. Like that's one of those little funny things that trigger you. But dust bunnies trigger me. Maybe because I've had so much sinus issue in my life. I'm always like, oh, I hate dust. But I would encourage people, like, just listen, just chat on the phone, text, call, or reach out. I mean, that's part of what we love to do. My father taught me many years ago. I was being kind of big shotty about our success in the mortgage business at the time that we were doing, and making a lot of money and a lot of transactions and making the President's Club, et cetera. And, oh, Dad, I made the X, Y, Z. And he said to me, he goes, well, not really how much money you make that matters, son. It's more about, did you really do your best every single day for every single person? Did you just give them your best? And the rest of it is vain. And I was like, wow, that was kind of, I didn't need to be vain. And what we've learned over time is when you do what's right, it's like, not to be so out there with it, but the universe kind of provides. There's always a way. There's always a path. And people listening are people. You guys are part of what we believe in ideologically and philosophically very similarly and very aligned. But we love the conversation. Like he used to say to me too, hey son, the problem isn't when the phone rings. The problem's when the phone doesn't ring.
Yeah.
So please, people, don't let our phone not ring.
Well, fortunately, we've laid a great solid foundation of the people we love to help, and have 20 plus years of loyal clients that are constantly making sure that the people they care about get connected with us. And we have several this week, obviously, that we will be taking on and coming up by the end of this month, mid-month, end of this month, and first week of October. And we have some new property that'll be coming on the market as well. I know we didn't get to all the questions that came in. Sorry, audience. We will maybe carry on the conversation going forward, but our time is up, and
yeah,
our Wi-Fi has not been great, but yeah, we'll definitely. And the other great thing that we have access to is our blog that Michelle has written every week. And that has some wonderful real estate questions on there, and neighborhood questions, etc. So we can try to post some of the Q&A on the blog, and we'll have it up on our Facebook and Instagram and our website as well, so that people can get answers to these questions that were really great, that we didn't get to all of. Sorry, we digressed a little bit on the show, but we definitely want to answer the questions that the community has had, and our friends and neighbors have had, etc. And know that our outreach is real, that our wanting to connect and our wanting to be just a real friend in the business and help people with their process, that's what helps us, feel gratifying and loved actually every single day, is the ability to be able to help people. That's our superpower, to help people with the knowledge and experience we have. That's our superpower, to make sure that we protect those that reach out to us and do our very best for them. And so that's what brings us joy, I think, and love and happiness every day, is to know that we do get to be superheroes to the people we help. And I know for us, Wonder Twins Activate, this is how we get to make sure that we together can morph into creating real accomplishments at the end of the day. So have a great Labor Day weekend, partner, and it's
Thank you. Likewise.
It's gonna be a hot one, so stay cool. And very excited.
Hydrate.
Yes. And boy, do we have a full week waiting for us on the other end of it. So excited for that as well. And congratulations, Oakhurst will be recording today. So that was a labor of love. So congrats on that. That was great. Cheers to us.
Thank you. All right, Jay. Hey, be well, girl.